Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Adriana. I usually run the WMBRB meetups, and I'm going to be moderating this panel today. We've got four amazing panelists here with us. We have Maple, we have Sweta, we have Toni, and we have Christine. They are either currently staff engineers or they have done staff engineering in the past. So let's kick things off with some introductions. If you can tell me your name, where you currently work, and maybe what your title is, that would be great. Maple, do you want to start us off?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Maple. I currently work at a company called Gusto. We're based in the United States. We are a payroll HR company. I work on the product infrastructure team here at Gusto. And what that essentially is like the intersection between the product work. We have a Rails monolith and the infrastructure behind that product. So previously I've worked on like the back end side of that, like Ruby, Rails, background jobs, and I'm now working on like the CI infrastructure um, for I guess our main monolith. Um, and yeah, my title is like what the equivalent is for staff externally. I don't think the numbers is going to be super helpful, but yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, Maple. Swetha, do you want to go next?
Yeah, for sure. Hey, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, evening. My name is Sweta. My pronouns are she, her. I work at BackerKit, which we're a crowdfunding platform. So you might have heard of Kickstarter. We're kind of a similar, target the same kind of customers. And I'm a staff engineer here. We are a pretty small team, so it's kind of a lot kind of spans the whole kind of code base, but yeah, we're a Rails app, and I'm sure we'll get into more. Based in Oakland.
Amazing. Thank you. Christine, do you want to go?
Sure. My name is Christine Seaman, pronouns she, her. I am based in Omaha, Nebraska, which is, if you're not in the United States, is in the middle of the US. So it's not a coast. It's literally no coast. I think they tried to make a thing about we don't coast. Nobody liked it. But I am a staff engineer at a small rail shop. I just recently had a change, and it's called Software LLC. It kind of does military software, but it's the HR systems for some military elite groups. I didn't know there was places that had more acronyms than technology, and I have found it. It is military technology. And actually, I have a connection with Maple that she didn't know. We are super Gusto users, so you get to run my HR system for the company I work at. Isn't that fun? But otherwise, I get to do a lot of project work right now, and I'm their first staff engineer. So we're still all trying to work out what the hell that actually means for them.
Amazing. Thanks, Christine. Last but not least, Toni, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, my name's Toni. I currently work at a company called Skydio, which I realize have sitting here. We're a drone company for commercial drones that do autonomous capabilities for all sorts of things. I am technically a senior software engineer on the infrastructure team here. I actually learned from my boss recently we have no staff engineers at all. So there's a possibility of moving into that role sometime this year. But I was a staff level engineer at Gusto, where I met Maple prior to moving over here, and kind of like worked my way through the IC ladder to like the top level IC I could before leaving to come to Skydio. And I'm in Denver, Colorado. I didn't say that earlier. So it is also cold here, and we also have no coast, but we do have a lot of great mountains.
Amazing. Thanks, Toni. Yeah, big thank you to all of our panelists for being here today. So glad to have you all here with us. Just a heads up, we're going to leave about 10 minutes at the end for questions. So if something pops into your head, maybe make a note of it for later and we'll come back around to that. Okay, so let's dive into the fun stuff and talk about what a staff role looks like. Some folks in this call may be familiar with it. Some folks, maybe haven't even heard the term staff before. Maple, can you share a little bit about what your staff role involves, what kinds of problems you solve, what kinds of things you do at work?
Yeah. So staff engineering or higher senior IC individual contributor roles at Gusto definitely varies. I believe the company does recognize that a senior IC or individual contributor archetypes. Like for example, if y'all have heard of like the generalist, specialist, fixer, builders type like archetypes. Me personally, I would say I'm more of a generalist. I think throughout my entire career, I've done a lot of bits and pieces around the stack, around Rails, Ruby, and also infra. And I think like one of the benefits, or at least like one of my strengths, is being able to adapt and learn quickly and adapt to what the org needs at the moment. And I think in general, all of the staff engineers kind of work, even though they have different archetypes and like traits and all that, we all work on the same level of scale. So that includes like long-term projects, talking with stakeholders outside of your org, and they're also typically familiar with one or more domain within the company. But yeah.
Thanks, Maple. That's, really interesting. And you touched on the archetypes. Maybe we can get into that a little bit more later. So I thought, can you tell me a little bit about what staff engineering looks like for you at your company?
Yeah, that was a really great kickoff to it because a lot of what you shared, Maple, I resonate with. I think it's kind of interesting. I feel like I've been at BackerKit for 4.5 years, so I've kind of also climbed the ladder. And I feel like as you kind of gain both like your own experience, but also depth into the product, one way I think of it is like you're kind of working up the chain in product development, almost like as in you get to problems earlier. The way I think of the staff role at BackerKit, and this is basically the top of our IC. We don't have principal engineers or anything yet. It's kind of like your productivity or your impact is like directly tied to the company goals, and it's kind of my responsibility to understand what our company and then product goals are, and find opportunities to impact that. And obviously a for-profit company, at the end of the day, the metrics you can kind of think of is revenue. So I think as your responsibilities grow, I think what your job is kind of becomes less defined and more on your own to kind of figure out what opportunities you can find, obviously in close collaboration with a lot of other folks on product. But on a day-to-day, the staff role at BackerKit it's kind of like maybe like a 50% split of like we're a pairing shop, and so that doesn't have to be why, but basically see myself as a peer leader. It's kind of anything that I can kind of hand off or delegate to, let's say, a senior engineer or anyone lower. That's kind of, as your time becomes more valuable, you want to do that, but it's kind of translating opportunities into bite-sized pieces that you can kind of hand off and then manage for other folks on the team. So maybe I'm speaking a lot, but maybe taking these ambiguous opportunities or problems and like shaping them, or reducing the technical complexity, or shipping something that allows someone else to kind of take it on, is a bit like this like translation layer that I think about for staff here, whether it's like product or more kind of even just internal infrastructure kinds of stuff for the dev team.
That's an awesome answer. Yeah, it was really interesting to hear you highlight both kind of the intersection of like being more product focused maybe as a staff engineer, but also kind of, your role as a staff engineer being to like empower your team and, delegate as necessary. Thank you. Christine, I would love to hear from you what it's been like being this kind of first staff engineer at your company and like kind of seeing that role emerge. What has that been like?
Like I have come from so Sweta kind of talked about what is that individual contributor chain, and that some places do have that. Okay, so you got your associate, you got your blank, or just engineer, then you got your senior engineer. So that's kind of like main individual contributors. And then depending on your hierarchy, you may then also have above that staff engineer. And then I definitely I came from WP Engine, which was a much bigger company that did have principal engineers as well as distinguished engineers. I have no clue what the hell distinguished engineers do, but like they're in the echelons of higher think. I don't know. They do something. They get paid more, I guess. And so I came from a company where I had started to figure out what a staff engineer meant at a large company. But now I have my brand new job as the first staff engineer at a very small company. And so what does me as a staff engineer there look like? Right now, it's very much I'm drinking the fire hose, if you've heard that, where I have all the information that everybody's been giving at me, and I'm still trying to get up to speed. So I'm doing a lot of project work, but since I am the first staff engineer and I'm trying to build that role, I'm also bringing up a lot of questions, in particular about the patterns we're using, making sure to, bring it up that we're doing like some event-driven architecture, very buzzy, making sure that I get that we're all on the same page on what event-driven architecture means, as well as, hey, we're doing event sourcing. Is this the same pattern as what I've seen over here? Kind of making sure things are aligned. And mostly my job right now is asking a whole bunch of questions and making a glossary. So everybody's on the same page of stuff. And so I have a big glossary and been going to a lot of meetings. And so for me, it's still kind of trying to figure out what that role means to them and making sure I'm keeping up with their expectations.
Amazing. Thanks, Christine. Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. It sounds like it's a lot of aligning and make sure that, people are kind of following the same conventions internally and, connecting the right people. Yeah.
And one thing that I have found to be similar, sorry, I do not mean to jump in, but Sweta brought this up, is that one thing I have found is it's about taking that ambiguous work. There's a project, it needs to be done, and you are breaking it down into these are the actual tickets that we need to do the thing. So it's taking the ambiguous and giving the seniors, giving the other engineers the concrete.
Super well said. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Toni, I know you mentioned that, previously you kind of climbed the ladder at Gusto, and now you are in kind of more of a senior role. I would love to hear from you, how you see the differences and kind of the roles you were doing and what it was like to, to kind of, move up that ladder at Gusto and how the role kind of evolved for you.
Yeah. For me, it kind of happens organically some. I think a lot, in my experience, what a staff engineer played at Gusto was being able to have the unique perspective, but still being an IC. So you're not managing people, you're still in the weeds doing stuff, while also starting to get invited to these higher level meetings or things where you see more cross org problems. And sometimes they're very technical and sometimes they're not. So a big role that I played was how do I convince 400 engineers in an organization that our app is slow and we should all do something about it? And how do I get an entire org to shift how they think about software development in some way over the course of not months, but years in some cases, or different project I took on was how do we revamp our incident response process, especially when we were forced to change software and then train all the engineers on this thing, And so I started at least having the perspective, nobody assigned me to do these things. I was just in the position to see that there were these issues that cut across so many teams and say hey, I think I can tackle some of these, let me go do it and try to get support both from leadership and from sort of grounds up movements to be able to do that sort of thing. So like it's not always necessarily solving like the big technical problems on how do we, unbundle this part of code to make it more modular or something. It's like there are other problems in any engineering organization that are almost more like people and process related, that it still takes somebody technical who's like been in there experiencing the problems themselves to be able to understand how to solve those. And so like, even though in my current job, I don't have a staff title, I'm now in a meeting with our head of engineering like every 2 weeks, and one of the projects I was working on for the summer is like, okay, we're using Sentry and Datadog and Mixpanel, and nobody's paying attention to Sentry and all our errors and stuff. Like, how can we consolidate everything in Datadog, get things assigned to teams, and then what does it look like for each of these teams to go like burn down their errors so they can have alerts that are actually like providing, signal to noise ratio on there. Like that's a problem I'm like currently working directly with our head of engineering on. So they're like, oh, this is a Toni shaped problem. You should go do it. So like, even though I don't have the title anymore, I'm still kind of like doing some of the same things that I did before on there, if that makes sense.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Toni. I have often heard, the work of a staff engineer described as like being a problem finder instead of a problem solver, and kind of what you were speaking to there was reminding me of that, you're like looking for gaps and you're the one kind of paying attention to things and noticing where, maybe stuff is kind of starting to slip through the cracks. I would love to ask kind of the panel in general, if you had to give kind of a ratio of how much time you get to spend coding versus doing other work, like, do you have an estimate of that, what that would be? And are you happy? Like, do you wish you were coding more? Do you wish you were coding less? What does that balance look like for you? Does anyone want to share? Yeah, Sweta.
Yeah, happy to share. I think every week can just look really different. I almost think about it less of like what percent time should I be in the code, and more like is the bigger problem I'm trying to solve served by writing code. We are a small team, and so like I would say no matter what, 30% of my time like I will be in the queue, just because that's the makeup of our team right now. But I think as software developers, code is just one of the tools that we have, and I think that's kind of the way to think about it. Sometimes it's like being in a lot of meetings with internal stakeholders or external stakeholders to like kind of do a lot of convincing or really understand. Like I really resonate with a lot of what you said, Toni. Like I think one of the jobs you're trying to do is, at least for me, it's like, what is like the smallest thing or the lowest hanging fruit, or like the right level of effort for making a change. And sometimes that can be like, oh, I'm going to put up like this one PR introducing a new pattern, or kind of like starting the refactor, or it can be that, because that's like the best tool for the job right now. And I believe I can convince who I need to convince to like care about something, or believe that there's an easier way to do this, or that we're missing like a domain object or something. But sometimes it's like having a lot of different touch points with folks across the company to understand like there's a problem here, and you want to kind of get the different perspectives. So perhaps you can find the smallest piece that can start like chipping away at it. And it's not always code. And I think it's like, it is a lot of like generating consensus building and like generating buy-in. And sometimes that's accomplished by code and sometimes that's not. And so it just super varies week by week. I've like been on even like super technical problems where like I was working on kind of trying to release a beta version of our first mobile app. And so that was like very technical. But again, like the idea is not for me to ship it as much as it is to like find the unknown unknowns so that it can be like a collectively owned thing. So I think I just have an it depends kind of answer.
The classic answer in engineering.
I'd say the same thing. Like for me, it was a lot of maybe like 50-50 or so, and even now. And I think especially like as a staff or even high senior level, a lot of times if you are more like a generalist or just someone who can like be thrown someplace, even at my current job, I feel like every 3 months it's like I'm getting chucked onto some other project that they're like, this team needs you to embed with them because they need help. And I'm like, I don't know crap about their stuff, but okay, let's go. It's like I just got moved projects again in December to come help out for actually a demo we're doing like next week on stuff, to help like move some things across the line. And so like sometimes you are spending a lot more time in meetings with process trying to like, it's like what you're saying, like convince people, like get some ball rolling on something that can like snowball into the change you need to see in the organization. And sometimes you get thrown into like, you need to dive really deep technical into this because this team needs some help and they need help quickly. And we know we can like put you there as almost like the Swiss Army knife to go get some things done.
Cool. Thank you both. Really interesting to hear your perspectives there. Christine and Maple, do either of you want to chime in?
Sure. With the writing code, I have to say it's like probably only 30% of actually writing code, but it seems like I look at code a lot more. And like you evaluate code and you are looking at code archaeology on the history of something that a decision was made before you were actually there, and you're trying to understand what the hell, why they did that. And so I'm reading a lot of Git history. So I have very strong opinions about your commit history. But I would say that like it's so weird. Like everybody wants to care about how much time you're writing code, but like sometimes it's about the time around the code. And with that is like, I don't know, 80% of my time. Cause like, I'm looking at code or I'm pairing on code most of the time right now. Also big fan of, if anybody hasn't tried out, what's that? The coding tuple. Tuple's been really fun for pairing. And that's been something at my new job that we've been getting to use. Big fan of tuple.
For me, I would say I code less frequently than when I was senior at a senior level. And I kind of share the same sentiment with everyone else who shared, where it kind of depends week to week and what state the projects are like. And there are definitely more meetings with stakeholders and people from other orgs. So yeah, it just really depends. But me personally, I do try to still prioritize time to code, primarily because I kind of feel the need to still be in touch with my technical skills. And there's some part of me that like feels like if I don't like stay in touch with that skill, I might lose it. So that's just a personal thing. But yeah.
Amazing. Thank you all. Moving on, I would love to hear a little bit more about kind of your journeys towards pursuing staff roles. Some of you have already touched on this a little bit, and it sounds like, the role kind of naturally emerged, as you were mentioning, Toni, because of the types of problems you were interested in solving. But yeah, I would love to hear if, there was kind of a moment where you decided like, oh, I'm interested in doing work that is more, oriented towards like what a staff engineer would do versus like senior IC work. Christine, maybe we'll start with you. What did that journey look like for you?
Sure. So I kind of had started with going to school for computer science because that major had computer in the name, and I was like, I like computers. So that's how I picked it, literally. I looked at the course catalog. I was like, yeah, that's good. Turned out it had a lot more math than I expected. But computer science, I still have used that degree a bit. It's not as helpful as you would think, actually, being a software engineer. But so I used to do Java. I did Java for 12 years before I even switched over to Ruby. So I moved over to Ruby in 2018. So I actually did the full track: associate, mid, senior, and a lead engineer at 2 other companies for Java ecosystem before I even switched over to a Ruby engineer at a smaller startup. And then that startup didn't quite have levels when I first joined. It was expected that I was kind of going in as senior, but then when they actually did levels, they're like, yeah, we don't actually think you're a senior. And so they made me a mid, which was kind of an ego bust, but they were paying me the same. So is it really an ego bust? I don't know. And so then kind of had to figure that out all again in a different company, because each company, it kind of does, what does your levels even mean? And so trying to figure that out, went through the mid, senior, and then staff eventually again. And so that can be, kind of a little bit disheartening when you think you're a certain level, but your company doesn't think you're a level. So that's one thing to remember. Do not tie your actual title to your own self-worth. That's something that's very good to remember. But why I wanted to do staff is because they seem to be getting the cool, hard problems, and I also wanted the cool, hard problems.
Awesome. Thanks, Christine. Toni, how about for you? I know you mentioned kind of, progressing through the levels at Gusto. Was it kind of clear what the stepping stones were and what the change in work would be going from one level to another? And how did you kind of get down that path and decide you wanted to do staff work?
Yeah, I would say it wasn't clear, and it also wasn't a conscious decision at the time. So like I was working just the like Rails backend for the first like 9 months or so I was there, and I had come from a much smaller company where we had like, I unintentionally became a like performance and database expert because we just had so many fires all the time. It was a giant disaster, and we had to fix them. And then I went to Gusto, and they were like, we only like work with small companies. We don't have any performance problems. And that was not my experience. And so I started a thing called the Performance Guild, which is like a monthly meeting trying to talk to people about performance topics and get them to like start doing it. And kind of like, I tried to get our leadership involved initially, and they were not on board, which I think happens sometimes when you're like, I want to make the app better 2 years from now. And they're like, but we have things we need to do right now. Why should we spend time on your thing? And so I kind of just kept it going in the background, but it did start snowballing. Where like people started seeing that I was having this more outsized contribution outside of my team, which helped me kind of like get that first promotion. And then like as you kind of move up, it also gets more people to buy into your thing. And so at the same time, I moved over to our infrastructure team, and I had a really great boss there who was basically like saw in me someone who could like get to staff in his mind, and he was like, it's my goal to help get you promoted there. Like, how can we make sure your work is seen by the rest of the company? So I will say it can very much like sometimes you may have to advocate a lot more for yourself. My initial boss there did not see a whole lot in me. And so like it can really depend on who you're under there. But, we were then kind of able to work together to say, like, how can we make sure that I am able to have the contributions that I want to have, that I can carve out time on my team. Even like I still had to do regular infrastructure work, but he was more than willing to say, you need 70% of this week to go work on these other performance related things and stuff. Like, I believe it, then like you go do it, And so that's kind of how mine happens.
Awesome. Thanks, Toni. I definitely want to circle back towards the kind of like advocating piece at the end. And, it's awesome to hear that you had someone in your court who was, supporting you towards the role that you wanted to fill. Sweta, can you tell me a little bit about what that progression towards staff was like for you?
Yeah, resonate really hard with a lot of things people have said, but I will wait till we talk about advocating for yourself. I think I basically was kind of hired at BackerKit as a mid-level developer, though it was probably it really is so different between orgs. And I will say, like, I have to say that I think leveling at especially past the mid-level, it is pretty murky territory. I think like I do feel like there is the business of doing staff or senior level work, and there's the business of like showing your work that you're doing it. So there's just like a huge gray area in my opinion. But got hired as a mid-level. And I think like one of the pivotal moments for me for doing more staff level work was we actually launched a new platform, which, I don't want to say like something in the company has to be what kind of pushes you to that. But when we went through that initiative, I kind of had been like a high senior at that point. And I made sure to kind of put myself in the room for some of these new architecture and technical questions we were going to have to answer. And in doing that work, I got promoted into tech lead, which is kind of our, I don't know if you want to call it the first staff or the last senior or whatever. It's our jumping point to a more staff level work, and the tech lead. Actually, if you read the archetypes that from like Tanya Riley, she even talks about that being one of the first kind of staff roles, where it was figuring out what it's like. It's kind of like we have where we want to be in 3 months, 4 months, backtracking of like what architecture things need to be figured out now, and doing a lot of kind of spelunking to integrate with our existing product. So yeah, that was kind of me working way more closely with product, but also doing a lot of like legacy refactors and things like that to support where we were going. And then as I kind of continue to take some more ownership of technical things and start finding more opportunities to kind of provide definition for ambiguous problems as we figured out what the hell we were doing as this new product, and kind of took on a bunch of technical projects. I got hired as into the staff role. It feels like in the continuum of doing like the same kind of work. Even as a senior, I was doing a lot of like taking ambiguous problems and making them actionable. But I think it's kind of like your bites get bigger and there's less unknown, and you're kind of just more and more autonomous. So that's what it feels like, at least.
Awesome. Yeah, really insightful answers, Sweta, and really interesting to kind of hear about, those stepping stones towards, as you were saying, more ambiguous problems, bigger scope. So yeah, very cool. I want to touch on archetypes because you mentioned it and I know Maple mentioned it, but first, Maple, can you just share a little bit about what your journey was like towards staff?
Yeah, so for me, I think the way I see it, there are kind of two ways. One of them is like actually getting the experience and the technical experience to operate comfortably at a staff level, and then the other one is actually like your org and your company recognizing you for it. And for me, I think I got really lucky in both aspects, where I had an amazing manager who saw like my potential and wanted to like mentor and grow me into that role. And then on the other hand, when I joined Gusto, it was there were a lot of opportunities to improve and take ownership of problem areas in the org. And so with that, like it feels like a great like kind of combination of events where I was able to hone in my like staff level skills, being comfortable with ambiguous issues, and also my manager like saw all the work that I did and was able to recognize me for it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Maple. Okay, back to archetypes for a sec, because I'm kind of curious about this. And I think Sweta, sorry, I'm losing my AirPod. I think Sweta posted a link to the archetypes in the chat there for those who are curious. I'm personally curious to know if you see the staff role at your company kind of map to one of those specific archetypes, or if it really kind of depends on the kind of person and how they want to show up in the role. Does anyone have anything to share there about, yeah. Maple, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I kind of have like a kind of a hot take, but maybe not so much, because I feel like that's what everyone's been talking about like this entire call. But I think the staff archetypes are a great framework to use, but it isn't like, I don't think a staff engineer should like necessarily try to fit themselves into one like mold, because all these skills like that are listed in the archetypes are skills that a staff engineer, I personally believe that you should be able to have all those skills when you need to. And so I think it's a great framework to have, but like I think it will be pretty bad if you try to like be someone who's like, I don't know, an architect or something. I think, as I said, you should be able to fit depending on what your team and your org needs. Yeah, that's my hot take.
To add
Awesome.
on
Yeah,
that too,
Tony.
like I think similar to levels, like we've all kind of said in the chat and everything too, like levels are and titles are wildly different at different companies and of different sizes and everything. Like I honestly didn't even know what level I was until like a few months ago. She just never talked about it. And then I was like, oh, I'm one below staff. Okay. But like again, I found out we have no staff engineers. Like, sure, archetypes are a little bit of the same way. I know while I was still at Gusto, like we made our own doc of archetypes and there were like 8 of them or something, and they each had paragraphs and people debate. They're like, well, I'm like a mix of this other thing. And like, so depending on where you go, they're going to define it differently too. And it's also like, I remember reading through it the first time when I think I was already like at L6 there or whatever. And I was like, I don't even know which one of these buckets I fit into. And like, does it really matter? Like I managed to get here somehow. So whatever title you want to assign me or archetype name you want to assign me doesn't change the work that I did or the work that I am doing. So I kind of focused a lot less on like, what is my title now? And just on like, what are the problems that I see in the org that I want to get solved that I'm willing to like take on.
If we're cool riffing, yeah, I think that's a great point. I think like the archetypes are useful to understand. Like I feel like it's kind of like this subset of skills that it's like you can use the same skills and apply them in these different ways, and it might help you see what kinds of like I like the problem finder kind of attribute. Like it might help you see what kinds of problems you might solve. But I do feel like it's kind of this idea of getting to the place where, yeah, you have this technical foundation, you have your reps at being able to. I think the tricky thing about bigger problems is like there's often more risk. And I think the technical foundation is important because you kind of have this like intuition of how you can hopefully kind of get in, get out, like ship like a slice of work that is kind of in measure to the problem you're trying to solve and like get feedback and like work quickly, or at least like I think when I was like at a senior level, I might like take on a bigger factor and it might blow up, and that's just a part of getting there, and you just have a little bit less bandwidth for that when you're at the staff level. But I like what you said, Maple, of like it's like getting the skills to be able to do those things, finding that matrix of like what problems can I solve. And I feel like there's that third thing of I think everyone should be advocating for making sure they're at the level of the work they're doing. And I believe there's a ton of people doing staff level work that are not staff engineers, or senior level work that are not senior level. So there's like this third part that's like, what can I brag about? Like having a really close relationship with your manager, making sure you have a manager that like is going to, you know, put you up for promotion or whatever the process is. So like there is like I think at least, you know, I feel like there's a lot of people who can fall into this, and I fell into this, so I can't help but like talk about it, where it's like you can be doing really impactful work and like still not get promoted, and like you really do need to be really conscious of like finding the problems that you're committed to solving, because yeah, you're going to have to do that like extra oomph. You might as well like really care about it, but like also make sure it's like within either a company goal or how your manager sees like what staff engineer is. Like you kind of have to do that teeing up too, to kind of play the game. So it's like it's a few different things at once.
Amazing. Really great answers, everyone. And Sweta, that was a really great segue towards us maybe talking a little bit more about the advocating for yourself bit, or, you know, making sure you get to be in that room where those conversations are being had. Christine, do you have kind of anything to share about, you know, what has worked for you in terms of advocating for yourself and showing that you're, you know, ready to be recognized at a certain level because you're already doing that work?
Sure. And I just want to reiterate what Sweta said, is that your manager is going to be your biggest advocate for there. So you need to get them on board. So if you are thinking about working towards a staff engineer role, you need to be having that conversation with that person so that they know, because they're not going to read your mind. And those one-on-ones need to be a good meeting for a reason. So make sure you're not just talking about your day-to-day in your one-on-ones with your manager. If you don't have one-on-ones with your manager, schedule the one-on-ones with your manager. And so that they know you want to be a staff engineer, or you want your senior engineer, but you want your staff engineer for your future. And then make sure that you guys are writing your story together, that they can lay out that entire plan, because there's all these other manager meetings that happen, which hopefully you don't have to be in, because you shouldn't be in. So you should have all these, your managers talking with tons of other managers. So they need to be bragging about you for certain things so that they can have an entire plan that it just makes sense. Of course, you should be a staff engineer. I've heard all of these things already about you. You're so awesome. Why aren't you already a staff? And then it's like, oh yeah, of course, that's easy. And so, yes, make sure you talk to your manager is the advice I would give.
Yeah, Toni, go ahead.
Yeah, keep a brag sheet, especially of all the things not related to like the actual coding project stuff you may still be working on, because your manager is probably highly familiar with those things, but you being in a totally separate set of meetings with some product people or design or some heads of engineering or other things that you're doing, like they may not be aware of entirely. I would find that out in my one-on-ones where I was like, yeah, I ended up this meeting about this thing. My boss was like, what? I was like, dude, we've been doing this for 3 weeks, but it's like, he's so far away from it of like this other random stuff that I'm doing as a staff engineer that like I need to consciously make sure I write it down and I bring it up. So by the time like calibrations come around or promotion conversation, it's like, yes, I did great on all these technical projects I'm still required to work on as part of my team. And here's the other massive body of work I've been doing as a like staff level engineer or soon to be staff level engineer across the organization that you can throw out there as examples to people of my work. So like write it down, make sure you bring it up.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip. Echoing what Zara shared, you fortunately, I mean, it is unfortunate, but like I think a lot about like how can you make it easy for your manager to promote you, like write your promo packet basically, and yeah, keeping track of what you're working on, even pulling like I'll put kind of the impact of the work that I'm working on too, to kind of directly tie it to kind of the bigger company goals. But I also feel like it's a problem if you're not sure where you stand in your promotion. So like definitely make sure you're having those one-on-ones, but also use those one-on-ones to make sure you're staying aligned with your manager. In most companies you kind of have to be doing the role for X months before you get promoted, but also like your manager is going to be putting you up for promotion like earlier in the cycle. And so just I like to make sure at least like once every quarter we're having a really like tactical conversation about where like my goal is like I should know how far I am, whether that's in like skills or it's probably not time, but sometimes it is, like to the next level, or like what do I need to show to prove that I'm at the next level. And like I think often in more senior roles, like that's not really clear. Like there might be, maybe there's companies where it is and that's great, but often there's these ideas of what it looks like, but unless you push the issue, it's kind of like the path of least resistance sometimes. And so getting really clear of like, I think I'm showing, these bullet points or whatever your level looks like in this way, and making sure your manager believes that or has buy-in, or, you kind of want to like, you want to be as specific as you can, because I think that helps show what gaps there are. And like, I know at BackerKit, we didn't have this level of engineers yet. So it was like kind of working in collaboration of defining what that is, which at the end of the day means a lot of work on your end to like show your receipts, like find how you can get aligned. And also like understand what is non-promotable work. Because I think this like glue work concept, the thing that I took the most away was like, there is non-promotable work. And if it's not going to be something that's promotable, like your time, like as you're in more meetings, etc., like your time becomes way more valuable. So you want to make sure the things you're spending on your time on is what's going to get promoted. Like sometimes you're doing work that the team doesn't care about. Like that is a truth, and like put it down, and like if it's important, it'll kind of make itself obvious, but you want to be really tactical with your time.
Really great answer, Sweta. Thank you. Yeah, really resonates with me hearing that, you need to, kind of scrutinize how you're using your time and make sure that you're doing the right thing. And yeah, glue work not being promotable work is going to be a takeaway for me for sure. I think someone posted, Sandra posted a talk about glue work, and I've seen a couple of other things posted. I would love to hear from the panel. Has there been a talk or a book or a blog post or anything that you found kind of helpful in, building your understanding of the staff role or the type of work that you do? Anything that you would kind of recommend someone watching or giving a read? Yeah, Christine, go ahead.
Sure. And this is one from book club not too long ago, and I'm pretty sure Sweta talked about it. The Staff Engineer's Path by Tanya Riley. Highly recommend. I have my entire copy here. Did I happen to get a staff engineer role right after reading it? Yes. So maybe that is a cause effect. I don't know, but highly recommend that, as well as yeah, that was the main one I could think of. Sweta, did you have one that you were thinking?
Yeah, definitely stole mine. Just kidding. Highly recommend. Also, maybe if you like, there's a lot of the book is great, and there's a lot of like other material with people kind of talking about how they use the book. So, yeah, definitely the Staff Engineer's Path. I think that's the same, or staffeng.com. It also is like a wealth of information. I've watched a lot of lead dev talks. There can be good ones in there. And then on the more technical side, a book that is a bit my like Bible is Working Effectively with Legacy Code. It's a Michael Feathers book. But I've learned a lot from there just on, I think when you're doing a lot of like spelunking or experimental code or trying to get like a proof of concept out, you often have to manage working in legacy systems. So that was really helpful for me on the technical side.
Amazing. Thank you. Okay, I did say we were going to do Q&A, and we're already past the time I was supposed to move to the Q&A, so we'll jump right into that. If anyone has a question, feel free to pop it in the chat or put your hand up. I know there was quite a lot of chatter in the chat, so I'll ask maybe that if you'd already asked a question that didn't really get answered, maybe just put it in the chat again so we can get to it. But yeah, does anyone have a question for our panelists? Okay, yeah, a couple coming in here. From Shauna, sorry if I'm not saying your name right. I was curious about Kaya's earlier question, how much management is actually expected of staff engineers? Does anyone want to take that? Yeah, Sweta.
I can share. At BackerKit, I think I'm working more closely with developers because I'm doing a lot of like player coach kinds of work. And so I'm not managing them. Well, okay, I guess I'm managing their technical work, as in I will give them feedback and kind of help them develop these skills on their own. I feel like it's more coaching. And then I have kind of a feedback loop with their managers. So we're kind of like the EMs and the staff eng kind of work in kind of a loop where like I'm giving feedback, and then they'll tell me what the growth areas are for different developers so I can find opportunities or help them find opportunities that kind of match what they're working on.
Awesome, thank you. We have a bunch of +1s for Danielle's question, so I'll jump to that first and then we'll circle back. What have folks done when you're intentionally growing your career and impact, but do not have a manager who believes in you/them? I believe at least Toni mentioned an experience with this, and I'm curious how you maneuvered forward. Toni, do you want to maybe take that to start with?
Yeah, I've had a range of managers over the year. I could say my initial one at Gusto, yeah, gave me like a meet on my first like 3 I had or whatever, which I felt like I was doing way more for my team and stuff at the time than it meets expectation. And so for me, it was like, I believed in myself. I don't know where you're coming from with this. And so like I tried to kind of manage up and talk to my like skip level and stuff first, which also wasn't very fruitful. Then he ended up leaving. So I swapped teams. I decided that like, yes, I want to stay at Gusto, but like this team is not going anywhere for me. It's not like recognizing my impact. And so I asked to move, initially as a rotation, and I stayed pretty quickly. And like my new manager structure was way better. And the first time I had a like performance review under my new manager, I give myself a meets because I was like, whatever, I just get meets on everything at this point. And he was like, are you serious right now? Like, why did you grade yourself this? And I was like, well, that's what this other manager gave me. And he was like, that's insane. We're going to reset from here. Like, let's just pretend that like none of her performance reviews matter for you. Like, where are you going with this? And so like, sometimes the answer is you can't change your manager, right? But you can choose to move teams, or you can choose to move it to a different company if you need to. Like, you kind of need to believe in yourself, recognize what you're bringing, and if it's not working where you are, make the decision for yourself to move.
Awesome. Thanks, Toni.
Yes,
Go ahead,
if I jump
Christine.
in just quick.
Of
Okay,
course.
Toni, that resonated very much with me. But yes, there are managers and teams that won't notice your work or won't feel like as like they'll feel a little draining. If you are encountering that, you need to find something else. You either need to, pivot on some of your communication strategies, or maybe there's a better team for you. I definitely have had ones where I have felt like I am being appreciated for what I bring to the team. And and then there's others where it felt like they wanted a certain mold, and that mold was not me. And you can only be yourself. And so if you're feeling like you're not bringing your whole self there, you need to find a new team. And hopefully you're at a place where you can do that. Otherwise, yeah, you might need to keep looking, because that's not a good feeling.
Thanks, Christine. Question from Caitlin. Other than just years of experience, are there specific recommendations you have for developing those skills faster? Does anyone want to answer that? Yes, with that.
I think I feel like a lot of it has to do with putting yourself in the way of kind of where these problems are being solved. So it was a lot of like keeping a growth mindset. So even within work that is, let's say, just like ticketed, there's often opportunities to, if you find code that got in your way, or you have a question of like, is this really solving the problem? Or if you go out and like check in on something after, like there is opportunities to kind of take the work that's already ticketed, etc., and find opportunities for growth into like more product thinking or some technical reps. But also like finding ways into the room, whether if like sometimes it's like developing relationships with people in your company and being like, oh, there's a problem here, and maybe like sketching out a solution or trying something and like bringing it to either your manager or somebody who's already staff or something like that. So it's a lot of some relationship building. I think I got to solve bigger problems by like having a mentor, being like kind of finding your way into the room, pushing your way into the room, however that is.
I got asked this a lot at Gusto before I left, because at the time that I left, I was at least the only like senior L6 woman I see that was there. And so people are like, I don't understand how to make the L3 to L4 jump or the L4 to L5 jump, because I'm use stupid numbers, not titles. But and my response back one time on Slack, many paragraphs, is like, look, here is a list of like many problems that I hear people complain about around the org that I don't personally like. I'm already working 3 separate projects to my thing that like I don't have the capacity to take these on, but like any of you at L3 or 4 or something could be the one to take this problem that you complain about on Slack or in these meetings and stuff and actually decide you want to do something about it and tackle it. And like that's how you start leveling up your skills, is instead of just being like, oh, it sucks that everybody writes really terrible commit messages all the time, or nobody puts descriptions in PRs or anything like that. Like something even small like that, and say like, okay, well, how can we make this better? How can I go try to get people to change this? Can I write a talk on it? Can we do it? Can we make a PR template? Like be that force that you want to see in there instead of just waiting for someone else to handle it.
Great answer, Toni. Okay, we are at time for today. I am sorry if we did not get to your question, but a really big thank you to all of our panelists, to Maple, Sweta, Christine, and Toni today for sharing their experiences and insights. Thanks everyone for coming, for bringing your questions and your enthusiasm. I hope everyone is maybe a little bit inspired to, to keep stretching towards that next, milestone in their work. So yeah, big thank you to everyone. We'll wrap things up here. Hope everyone has a great rest of your week, and we'll see you back here in February.